oh, there's Tom, to the Roman people, basically to ask for votes. It's a much more humiliating equivalent of having to make yourself vulnerable. You know, like when you see politicians, hey Tom, I was just talking about this scene in which he's profoundly uncomfortable.
Keep going. Yeah.
You know, also it's the when, for example, like with female politicians, you sometimes, they've stopped doing this now, but they go, really, what you've got to be seen doing is baking. You know, you sometimes see people who've never baked in their life go, I'm going to do something that I'm going to try and make me look authentic, and he resists it in the
Yes.
most profound way, I think.
Yes. What I think is really resonant is you have a leader standing for election to high office, refusing to connect with the people he will be representing. He will
Yeah,
be refusing to connect with the people who are going to elect him. He resents and is contemptuous of the practice of asking for people's votes or voices.
yeah.
And
One might even say he has no idea whatsoever as to why he should hold himself to the same account as everybody else. But I shall try and not be too satirical. But you know, that's a great echo in this play, I think, is about whether or not people consider themselves to be above what everybody else does or has to do.
yes,
Um, I actually think his exceptionalism runs psychologically very, very deep. So there is more going on than
yeah,
that, I think. But yeah, it's sadly never not a resonant play.
very sadly, yes,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yes,
Thank you, people who are sympathetically commenting on my inability to run this efficiently via Instagram Live. I do apologize. It might be like my bad. Yes, art imitates life. Absolutely. I'm really enjoying these comments. And just a quick shout to thank everybody who donated earlier. I didn't get a chance to do that thing where I sort of click and say thank you, but I shall make sure that I find some way to do that and post a proper thanks to you. I know everyone really appreciates it. Um,
we're
oh,
moving we're moving towards a moment in the play where you see this, you see a tension in the middle of the play, right at the beginning of Act 3, I think. You see a tension in Marcius, now named Coriolanus for his military achievements. And that tension is being pushed towards consulship, towards the highest office in this
yeah.
society, in this city.
And we worked out in rehearsals, didn't we, to sort of, it was helpful to manifest that visually. So we created this thing, which is part of the production rather than part of the play, where you're snatching at these red ballots that will then play um, uh, in the following scene in a really amazing way. But it was quite helpful, I thought, for the clarity to see him literally collecting what you think of as votes. Um,
Yes. It's a
yeah,
play about power. It's a play about power and who gets to wield it and who deserves it. Who and in the central character, does he have the capacity to wield it, and how power corrupts the mind of the individual who bears the responsibility of it.
yeah.
Um, and
What's really great about this scene that's running now is that, and anybody who's listening to us at the same time as watching this, I urge you to go back and watch any of it. But this scene is an amazing study in watching these two extraordinarily sleek and smart politicians, the two tribunes here, flip a crowd.
mm, yes,
The seed of resentment was already sown by
yeah,
Coriolanus, by Caius Marcius in this scene, but the way that they work them up is really, really extraordinary. And I just thought Elliot and Helen were so brilliant in this.
yeah,
You know, and they're reasonable, they're right. Um, but it's a great, you know, it's for any of you who are drama students or acting students or anything like that. I mean, you can look at people's work in the whole of this play, but this is a great scene study, actually, how this occurs, I think. There's a brilliant Mark Stanley. Yeah. The National Theatre is saying to people that you can donate from the USA in response to their questions, if anyone else is asking that. And some people said, can I switch the comments off? I'm going to keep them, if that's okay, because I don't really have time, and partly I'm technically too incompetent to be able to jump to this thing, which I think is questions. Yeah, which is some good stuff here. Like, do you think Caius Marcius did all this just for his mother's approval, which is a question beginning the play? What's the most terrifying thing about playing this role? So I will try and click those, but you can stick them in the comments as well.
Yeah, can I use that as a jumping off point?
Mm.
I think it's an amazingly psychologically acute question, because I think perhaps in all of us, we would concede that in some way we all want to make our parents proud. And I think in Marcius that need is incredibly intense, because of the very complex attachment he has to his mother. But we are about to get to a place in the play where Marcius's anger and rage and loss of temper and patience and propriety evokes a kind of condemnation from his mother, and his mother tries to persuade him through lots of different kind of rhetorical tactics to get a grip, to be honest. And actually his temper has created a terrifying situation, and his mother now urges temperance, calm, reflection.
Are you ahead of me because you've not lost it yet?
No,
no, you're about to lose it. Oh, and the ballots flying where you are.
Okay, there you go. So whoever asked that question about does Marcius do this to please his mother, I think the play is asking that question. And in the following scene, there's a quote which I really latched onto the very first time I read it. Volumnia is preaching patience, calm, reflection, healing. That he should go back into the marketplace and be conciliatory and heal these wounds he's created, and be milder. The word is milder, mildly, to behave mildly. And Marcius says, why did you wish me milder? Would you have me false to my nature? Rather say I play the man I am. This relationship in the play about what integrity is, somehow, that the right thing to do would seem to be, if you've created a terrible situation, to go back and make amends. But Marcius's defense is that he was being honest, that he wasn't being false, that to go back would be to lie, and he doesn't, and that would be a kind of offense to his honor.
Can I that's coming up, that scene, and let's just set this up because it's great for people to just keep an eye on the run of this. So a lot of what we did in this staging actually we created in the rehearsal room. So in the original play, a lot of this scene, well, the ballots don't exist. You don't see that manifestation of an election being overturned. But what it felt in this very minimal production with hardly any props at all was that when objects appeared, they were incredibly significant, and that was a really good bit of storytelling. So you saw the tribunes come on then and fling the ballots out, and what they're doing, because they understand his character, perhaps on a level that even he doesn't. You said brilliantly before, Tom, that he doesn't have this quality of self-reflection, is they're trying to get him to lose his shit. And I was thinking of this again, not to push too much at the.
They know about his character that he will, and they know that it's the part of his character that has. I mean, what's the contemporary analogy? The contemporary analogy of great sportsmen who try to light a fire within themselves to overreach in their achievements, to somehow to find the competitive edge that allows them to win that match or to defeat their opponent.
Yeah.
And it's the proximity to extraordinary aggression, which in battle and in warfare, Marsh is able to channel. But the patience and the containment is required in politics, and he is uncontained.
Yeah,
so
it's you can't handle the truth, isn't it?
yeah
You know, it's a version of that. It's also, to be honest, I've thought about this scene a little bit over the past couple of months, looking at daily briefings, and maybe a certain notable moment in the garden of Downing Street, where what you see is, you know, in this instance, correctly, pressure being put onto politicians and political advisors to give an account of themselves, of what they're doing. But there is also a degree of goading going on.
Yes.
I think, and a desire to try and capture something that is unguarded, or something that feels more truthful than what's being said. And this scene is a fantastic manifestation of that. And again, just to praise this company, it was an amazing collective act, poetically as well, in Shakespeare's language, in rhythm, of driving you towards that explosion. And I just want to skip on actually to tee up what you were saying in this scene that we'll see after this with the amazing Deborah Finlay, because I think that's so key, and it was such a revelation for me in rehearsal. I remember finding that moment with both of you through some really good discussion of it. The idea that she asks you to lie, to go back out there and not and dissemble, to not be true to your feelings, to not be straightforward. The way Deborah plays that, your mother has never asked you to do that before. Now she's doing it because she thinks not only your career but your life is at stake, although perhaps for her those are the same thing. And you know, I think again Deb embodied that brilliantly.
Yeah.
And the moment that happens between you when she asks you to tell a lie and to become a politician is really, really amazing. Someone just said in the comments, Tommy, you look sad, are you okay? I actually think you're reacting that moment to answer someone's comment. It's a very profound moment. Yeah.
I'm just thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking. It just is a very intense. It's very intense. It's a very intense play, and it was a very intense thing to inhabit.
But those are amazing moments, aren't they? Those moments where we realise, goodness, I hope my mum isn't watching this, that our parents aren't infallible, that our parents might ask us to do something that doesn't run straight along the codes that they've taught us. And they might do that for our own survival, and they might contradict perhaps their own sense of justice, which is what happens, I think, between them in that moment. And I remember that so vividly, because I remember that revelation rehearsal. That's one of the great moments I had as a director, which is discussing that, working it, finding it, and doing it, which you can't always get to happen at the same time.
Also, there's something about this is something very profound about any of our lives, which is a great change is possible when you realize that you have to take responsibility for who you are and what you do. That actually it starts, so that if to use myself as an example, my behavior starts with me. My actions, my responses, my opinions, my views, it's on me. I can't point the finger at other people, at my, you know, there's an amazing line, I don't know where it started, but we all possess within us a very profound power, which is the power of how we respond. We're not responsible for the things that happen to us, but we are responsible for how we respond. And I don't think Marcius has quite appreciated that in his journey yet. Can I say something about I'm watching a scene. I don't know where everybody else is in watching it now, but this I think is extremely a resonant moment, which is quite disturbing. which is that Marcius has been elected to the highest office in this society, and he is threatening to use the military force at his disposal against his own people.
Yeah.
And it's very, very troubling.
It's very troubling. He's just been put in charge of everyone, and he's pulled out his sword on the floor of the Senate.
Yes.
And that sword is not just, I think, him threatening his personal physical power, but it's a total deal break for the moment. And you can see Peter de Jersey there, where I'm in my feeders, Cominius, try and calm him down, because, you know, that sword's got the military behind it. I think the extension of that arm has
Yes.
an exceptional muscle, and
High,
everybody, it goes very high, and everyone's very aware of what's just occurred.
Yeah, the stakes go very high, which is why the tribunes brand him a traitor and an enemy of the people.
Yeah.
That, I think it's Sicilia Helen Schlesinger, as the tribune, begins to articulate what that is, which is that he has elevated himself to a power tyrannical.
Yeah. Can I just briefly shout out for all the actors clearing up paper off the floor at this point, while a small boy runs around, just because, you know, you come up with these moments and then you have to ask the acting company to go and pick up 200 ballots. So sorry, Tom, to interrupt you, but I do feel a great wave of guilt asking actors to do a really boring scene change.
It's created to buy and sell.
I'm just trying to. This is the scene now. We're up to the scene, aren't we?
Yeah. Someone's saying, could I explain the significance of the young boy with the sword? The young boy with the sword plays Caius Marcius's, Coriolanus's son, through the production, but you see him, I mean, on a very real level. I've got to do something while people pick up ballots, but I think he serves just poetically as a little reminder of this mother and son relationship, and of Caius Marcius's childhood, really, which was so deeply formative, because there's no father present in this play.
Yes, we talked about that a lot, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good point. I often thought about that.
Someone's just said, what's your favourite scene? It might be this one, possibly, but yeah.
Well, it's a theme. It's the theme of the relationship between mother and son that runs between the play. But you've raised a great point, which is worth considering. My opinion, for what it's worth, which is a deeply untested, unacademic, amateur one, is that I think if you were to draw a comparison between the number of times Shakespeare examines relationships between fathers and sons in his plays, or parents and children, more often you will find a father involved. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of examples. I'm thinking of, I immediately think of Hamlet and the absent father and the ghost of the father. I think of King Lear, which is a father and three daughters, and then also Gloucester, Edmund and Edgar. Henry IV, which is King Henry IV and Prince Hal. Mm-hmm. And what the presence of a father does to the child, what Lear does to Cordelia and Goneril and Regan.
Someone's saying, as you like it, 12 points, yeah.
As you like it.
Yeah.
Cymbeline and Imogen.
Angela Carter says, why is Shakespeare always about fathers and daughters and never mothers and daughters? That's mothers and daughters actually is what he doesn't write. Just to be briefly academic about it.
But from memory, apart from Gertrude and Hamlet, this relationship here is the most explored.
For
between
me, yeah, this is
mother.
this is the great mother-son relationship. But uh,
I played Hamlet after this
yeah,
uh, in a product. Well, I guess it was 3 years after this, and Lalita Chakrabarti played Gertrude, and we talked at length during the process of rehearsing and performing that play. How what an anyone who knows Hamlet knows there is an extraordinary scene in the middle of that play where Hamlet rounds on Gertrude, his mother, for marrying his uncle, and so much of his grievance is about the speed with which his mother moved on from his father to his uncle, and how could you have moved from this extraordinary man to this imitation of man, this poor imitation of a man. And long story short, Lolita and I talked at length about how Shakespeare doesn't give Gertrude much to say in her own defense.
no,
She doesn't get to sort of represent her interests. She never gets to say, look, it was quite complicated, and can I talk to you about it?
no, it's pretty tough for me actually. Yeah.
She mostly has to. She's written as someone who is very shocked by the strength of his rage, and very disturbed by Hamlet's haunting. She doesn't see the ghost, but she's very disturbed by the psychologically disturbed by the scene, but she doesn't get to articulate much apart from her own shock. And I often thought of this relationship between Volumnia.
There's that look we were talking about. Sorry, it's just got to the amazing bit with you and Deborah. And also just in the staging there, just those three, parents, all to an extent. He doesn't have a father, but he has these two father figures, just all looking at him and bearing down on him with the weight of their love for him. Sorry, Tom, I interrupted you mid-flow there,
No,
but
that's a good point. Menenius is referred to as his uncle. We don't know whether that's a kind of he's an uncle figure, an avuncular presence, or he's actually an uncle by blood. And then Cominius, played by Peter de Jersey, is a father figure in terms of being a military superior. Yeah. Cominius in the play has been a Roman general, and he has also been a consul, and a successful one in both roles. And I suppose is somebody who Marcius would respect.
In this scene as well that's happening, what you see brilliantly is a flare of your mother's temper, in terms of where does he get it from.
Well,
there you go.
She says, thy valiantness was mine, thou suck'st it from me, but oh, thy pride thyself. He's she's the only one who can influence him. Which is why I think psychologically it's such a fascinating relationship to play.
Yeah. Well, it's just watching you go, okay, thank you. Yep, got that. Cool.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, someone just said here, the wince when you yield is great. Really great.
Mildly, you see the resentment. It's so curious. There is the strength of his resentment at doing something he doesn't believe in.
Yeah. Someone's just said, can we explain the difference between consul and tribune? And that's a brilliant question, I think, in terms of the different versions of politicians and political classes in the play. So the tribunes, you could say self-styled, or a version of elected, are the voices of the people. In some other productions of Coriolanus, they're sometimes played as, union leaders or representatives of working bodies.
Mm.
They'd probably be the closest to members of parliament, or if you're watching from another country, state representatives. So they carry with them the authority of representing the people. The consuls are exclusively, in this version of Rome, I say elected. The vote is not necessarily of the people. It's not necessarily what you need to be made consul. You're made consul by your peers, by the Senate, but you need the voices of the people to be able to do it.
Mm.
So the consuls are the ruling class. They're the privileged. They often come from the warriors. They will have been, as Volumnia has with Caius Marcius, which is Coriolanus's name before he sacks the city of Coriolis and is given the name as a tribute and an honor. They're raised into those roles, and there's an expectation. You might say, we know, don't we, that our current Prime Minister, I think, said when he was very, very young that he was going to be Prime Minister. Now, that's not exclusive to someone of Boris Johnson's background, which is a privileged background, but there is a sense that there is a privileged class who are shown the routes to attaining a consulship. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because you have to. We've got a kind of a Jenga tower of historical references. We've got, we're interpreting Shakespeare, who is fashioning his understanding of Roman history through Elizabethan politics, and he's leaning on either secondary sources or he's leaning on the Roman historian Livy or the Greek historian Plutarch, who wrote these lives of these ancient figures.
Check out Livy and Plutarch, everybody, if you want to go deeper into Coriolanus.
And talking really about, talking about a figure who may or may not have existed 2,500 years ago, when Rome was not an empire. It was a young, early republic, a young society trying to organize itself. And it's
really great point is that Britain had not been a democracy when Shakespeare wrote this play.
It was still a monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and Rome itself has a curious history, because after this, the Republic became more sophisticated, I think, and this is a slightly nerdy classical aside, but Romans became very frightened of tyrants. Autocracy was deemed as a very bad thing, that one individual could held sway in power absolute, and something closer to a republic, which was a kind of equality distributed among the people, but with a governing body who were deemed responsible enough to make important decisions. And then, as we see in Julius Caesar, people get competitive about who holds most sway. And after Julius Caesar's time, you have the first Roman emperor, and then you're in an empire with an emperor for 300 years, 300 odd, until Constantine.
Tom, I'm going to pause you for 1 second so we can just reflect on what's going on this scene.
Yes.
Because it's so great. Not that I am not keen that you walk us through Roman history.
I finished.
It's good. Because actually someone just asked on the questions how you break down a play like this. And one of the ways in which you do it is by jumping into that Roman history and working out not only the context in which Shakespeare was writing, but also the period he was writing about. That was very much part of our process. But where you're heading, I think, with all of that research is to a distillation where you just wind up with you stood in a black square that's just been painted to be tried in public. And what Helen Schlesinger is doing brilliantly here is working up the crowd that is the audience of the Donmar Warehouse.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
as you know, we've got a really small company, and brilliantly, you know, the actors are in amongst the audience at this point, pushing it forward.
Yeah.
There's Peter Jersey pleading for what actually converts from being your consulship to your life, I think, at this point.
This is the turning point where the people banish the tyrant from the city.
Yeah.
And what follows is a piece of poetry by Shakespeare, which is one of the most contemptuous, bilious, aggressive pieces of poetry I've ever come across.
Someone just said on the YouTube comments, "Oh my God, this is my school." And actually, I think there is a thing where, here we go, you're being bullied till you break.
It's the breaking point.
Yeah. Great. I banish you. He just cancelled Rome.
Having been cancelled by Rome.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do societies control the power of tyrants? Question mark. Discuss.
Yeah.
This line that's coming up, one of the most famous lines in the play. There is a world elsewhere. And there's something else about Marcius Coriolanus, which I want to just briefly touch on, which is his stubbornness, obstinacy, intransigence, and warlike nature are all bound up in his self-created isolation. He's one of the most lonely or alone characters in Shakespeare that I can think of. Yeah. And he continues to make himself alone. He uses that first person pronoun, I, so much. Yeah. I banish you.
One of the amazing things I was going to say about having the actors on stage for the first half is that he can go, there's a world elsewhere. Michael can just write this really brief piece of music, which is just enough for Deborah to step forward and your mother can be there. Yeah. And what's brilliant is about the proximity of action to consequence when you're doing a production on this scale.
Yeah.
You know, it's this amazing cry, chilling cry that's just when she realizes the consequence of what you've done. You know, so extraordinary. And I think there's something in your performance there, Tom, as you're right, he doesn't have a lot of room for self-reflection, but he knows what he's doing at the end of that scene. In your performance here, it doesn't come out of heat. He might not understand what's going to happen to him, but he makes the choice.
Yes. Yeah. Born out of, I don't know what, born out of some extraordinary, almost unnatural degree of self-determination.
He just can't bear it anymore, can he? I'm sort of, I'm being silly when I say he cancels Rome, but he sort of cancels himself as well. And I think in the second act, you see that in where he goes.
Yes. Well, and to simplify it, somebody told me when we first committed to doing this together, that you can reduce the tragic flaws of his great tragic plays, of Shakespeare's great tragic plays, to almost one word. With Hamlet, it's grief. With Othello, it's jealousy. With Lear, it's, what would you say, madness, or
no, I don't know. I'm gonna ask Rob Hasty that later. He'll be well equipped to answer that question, but I don't think it is.
I'm thinking about the tragedies now.
Safety, I think, probably to an extent in Lear. But what is it with Coriolanus then?
Pride. pride in the ancient sense. Not like, oh, I'm really proud of a friend for, you know, for achieving that thing they're always supposed to achieve, but pride meaning a degree of entitlement that is enlarged and amplified within you, which creates an impenetrable sense of superiority.
Yeah.
That's Martus's downfall, is pride. A lack, I suppose pride is the opposite of humility.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yes, I would. I think for me, it's also a play about anger as this terrifying force, as a force for destruction, as a force for change, how new worlds are created and broken, how it corrodes the self. You know, the amazing thing about this relationship with this son and his mother is that when you get right down to it, there is a rage there that possesses both of them.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I was always very interested. Look, we think it's late among Shakespeare's tragedies, and I mean, he didn't. I mean, he lived to a relatively ripe old age for the century he was living in, but you know, it's toward the end of his career as a playwright, and I do think also there's a sort of what he's done is put some of his professional impatience. You know, I sometimes think, wow, that must be 20 years of just getting nonsense notes on your plays from people, you know, 20 years of people going, you know what would be really great is if you changed that bit. I mean, Tom Stoppard plays with that hilariously. Oh, hang on, wait, we're at the tomatoes.
Okay.
So we got to talk about tomatoes.
Okay. Well,
And it's the interval, but let's take us into the interval by talking about tomatoes, Tom.
Okay. We wanted to close with an image of humiliation, I think, and you know, what does it mean to have been Rome's greatest champion, mm-hmm. and then to have the entire city, ostracize you, and what does that look like?
I'm just going to interrupt you there. I was just going to talk about poaching tomatoes so they didn't hurt your face.
Yes, well, I can't remember how I was going to. How do we decide to do?
Thank you for the tomato emoji, people in the comments. I think we definitely experimented with lots of different types of soft fruit. Just pointing out tomatoes as a fruit there. Just people are impressed by my broad base of knowledge of organic foods. But yeah, we settled on tomatoes. We tried it with some stuff. We did need to cook them a little bit so that they didn't attack you.
Technical rehearsal, because it's important. Let's say it's important that these tomatoes are thrown with some force and velocity,
and aim.
And I was like, oh, that felt more like a rock than a tomato.
Yeah. Wasn't poached enough. Don't know. It's just.
So we decided to poach them so that in order that when they hit me, they sort of they sort of splattered in an appropriately humiliating way.
Yeah.
They weren't too hard, because you know, sometimes on a 2-show day, because we did matinees and evening performances sometimes back to back, I thought, I don't know if those tomatoes aren't soft, I don't know how I'm going to feel about myself in the interval.
Yeah.
However, there were always, I mean, maybe this is true of all theatre companies, there were backstage always, every night, astonishing reserves of cake and supplies.
It's a lot of cake. Talking of which, I'm just going to find my corkscrew, just because I'm going to have some wine, because it was the interval.
Thursday,
there we go.
Yeah. 9:30.
Yeah. It's quite. What time is it where you are?
3:30.
3:30. So you can't have any wine. Sorry, you were talking about cake. Yes. Can I just make a suggestion? I'm just thinking No, I think I get a warning when I'm running out of Instagram Lives.
Uh,
Maybe we'll just leave it until then. I was going to jump out at the interval, but I got distracted with tomatoes. So, and opening my own wine, frankly. Wow, look at this. We've raised a further £1,700 and 59 pence.
Amazing.
You people are absolutely amazing. And people are also donating directly via YouTube. And that's so great. Thank you.
Thank
We
you,
really
everybody.
appreciate that.
It means a lot. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to the theatre community in the UK. I'll just say briefly, I was so honoured that the National Theatre wanted to come to the Donmar and broadcast this production, because I think at that time the National Theatre Live broadcasts were almost always productions which were staged inside the National Theatre building. And I remember when you said, like, I think we might be able to do a broadcast of this, and it's just such a we were all so grateful that we were able to, that this production could be seen beyond the confines of the very small theatre we were performing in.
Yeah.
And it just is, it is a part of the tradition of live performance in the UK, and I know it's something that you and I are proud of.
Really proud.
And
not in a Coriolanus way, though.
Not in a Coriolanus way. We're grateful that we're allowed to be part of that community. I think
Yeah.
British theatre is something that has been world class for a very long time, and was long before I was even around or interested in joining it.
I think it's probably true to say, I mean, I know there are many roles that you're famous for, but you would not be Loki were it not for theatre.
Yes, I started my life in the theatre for 100%. I started my acting life with Shakespeare. Shakespeare is, for many British, not all. I understand it's not everyone's beginnings or necessarily their cup of tea, but for many actors, grounding in Shakespeare is a sort of entry point, not just in the UK but all over the world. We're to your point about the enormous generosity of these donations.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you sincerely from us. It means a great deal.
Yeah, it means absolutely loads. And look, there are lots of very, very worthy places and causes at the moment, but I think for you and me to be able to get on here and talk about this thing that we love and value so much and owe so much to, and have you support that's really great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'm going to see if Hadley Fraser is there.
I think it's a very wise moment, because
You should get a cup of tea. I'm going to try and find Hadley Fraser. If I can't find Hadley Fraser, it will be me talking. So come back and rescue everyone from me, Tom. But let's see if Hadley's there.
I will see you
Thanks,
shortly.
love. Cool. Bye.
Bye.